Hello everybody, this is David. Welcome back to my channel. This video is the next in our series, The Christian Ethic in the 21st Century. And we're currently looking at money and possessions and wealth and what the Old Testament and Jesus Christ himself has to say about it. In this video I want to be having a look at a parable that Jesus taught, and that has something to tell us about Jesus's attitude to wealth. And that parable is of the rich man and Lazarus, as we read in the book of Luke chapter 16 verses 19 to 31. Let me read that parable to you now. Luke chapter 16 verses 19 to 31. Subtitled in my Bible, The Rich Man and Lazarus. There was a certain man who was clothed in purple and fine linen, and fared sumptuously every day. That meant he ate well. But there was a certain beggar named Lazarus, full of sores, who was laid at his gate, desiring to be fed with the crumbs which fell from the rich man's table. Moreover, the dogs came and licked his sores. So it was that the beggar died, and was carried by the angels to Abraham's bosom. The rich man also died and was buried, and being in torment in Hades, he lifted up his eyes and saw Abraham afar off and Lazarus in his bosom. Then he cried and said, Father Abraham, have mercy on me, and send Lazarus, that he may dip the tip of his finger in water and cool my tongue, for I am tormented in this flame. But Abraham said, Son, remember that in your lifetime you received your good things, and likewise Lazarus evil things, but now he is comforted and you are tormented. And besides all this, between us and you there is a great gulf fixed, so that those who want to pass from here to you cannot, nor can those from there pass to us. Then he said, I beg you therefore, Father, that you would send him to my father's house, for I have 5 brothers, that he may testify to them, lest they also come to this place of torment. Abraham said to him, They have Moses and the prophets, let them hear them. And he said, No, Father Abraham, but if one goes to them from the dead, they will repent. But he said to him, If they do not hear Moses and the prophets, neither will they be persuaded, though one rise from the dead. May the Lord bless the public reading of his word. So this is the story of 2 men, one who was rich, and he was dressed in the finest clothes and ate the finest food. There was nothing in the world that he did not possess. The other was Lazarus, a beggar with ulcerated sores on his body, so helpless that he could not even keep off the dogs. Daily he was placed at the gate of the rich man's house, and he did at least get crumbs that fell from the rich man's table. Then the scene changes. It is no longer this world, but the world to come. And in that other world, the rich man is in agony and torture, and the poor man is in his bliss and blessedness. And there is no altering of their positions. What is this parable saying? Now, there has just been a reference in the previous passage to the Pharisees, who were lovers of money, as we read in chapter 16 verse 14. Now the Pharisees, who were lovers of money, also heard all these things, and they derided him. Jesus is basically having a conversation with the Pharisees. So this parable has something to say about money. What it is condemning so unsparingly is irresponsibility, lack of awareness, lack of concern. There is no indication that the rich man was in any way cruel to Lazarus in an active way. He let him lie there. He let him have the crumbs that fell from his table. The trouble was that he never noticed him. To the rich man, Lazarus was part of the scenery. If ever he did notice him, it never struck him that Lazarus had anything to do with him. He was simply unaware of his presence, or if he was aware of it, he had no sense of responsibility for him. So this parable is a vivid illustration of the fact that a man may well be condemned not for doing something, but for doing nothing. As it has been said, it was not what the rich man did that got him into jail. It was what he did not do that got him there. So Hugh Martin, writing on this parable in the Parables of the Gospel, says that Dale called this parable the indignation of infinite love at white heat. Let me say that phrase again. He called this parable the indignation of infinite love at white heat. And that Alexander Maclaren called it, and I quote, the sternest of Christ's parables, end of quote. So the condemnation is for the man who has money and who is quite unaware of those who have not. For the man who has no sense of responsibility for those who are less fortunate than he is. Now, there are many people that will spend money on a dinner in a plush restaurant, even on drinks at such a dinner, at a total cost exceeding, for example, the weekly old age pension of a person or a person on benefits, and couldn't care less, just doesn't even think about it. So the New Testament, not there's anything wrong with that, but the New Testament unsparingly condemns irresponsibility, whether that irresponsibility be personal or national irresponsibility. It insists that no person or nation has a right to live in luxury while others live in poverty. Now, it could be argued that we are forced to help others through the taxation system. But while that's true, a fiscal obligation cannot take the place of personal awareness. The simple fact is that no man has the right to live like the rich man while Lazarus is at his gates. Lots to think about there, isn't there? So I want to have a look at now another parable, and that is it's very relevant for our discussion in this video, and that is the record of the cleansing of the temple by Jesus. And again, there's 4 places where that's written about. In Matthew chapter 21 verses 12 and 13, Mark 11 verses 15 and 16, Luke 19 verses 45 and 46, which I'll read, and John chapter 2 verses 13 to 37. So 45 and 46 says, "Then he," that is Jesus, "went into the temple, began to drive out those who bought and sold in it, saying to them, 'It is written, my house is a house of prayer, but you have made it a den of thieves.'" So here is the only incident in the New Testament where we find Jesus moved to violence. So it must have been an incident of special significance. So Jesus drove out of the temple courts the changers of money and the sellers of sacrificial victims. Now at the Passover time, the temple tax was paid. The temple tax was about half a shekel. Now that does not sound much, but it has to be remembered that the average day's pay in Palestine in the time of Jesus amounted to about 4 pence. And that means that the temple tax represented about 2 days' pay, which is quite a considerable sum. If you imagine today the average wage, say £150 a day, some less, some more, for example, then that would be £300 that a person had to pay. So, since it was the ambition of every Jew to keep one Passover in Jerusalem, the city was crowded with Jews who had come from all over the world. Since they came from all over the world, they brought all kinds of currency: Roman, Greek, Egyptian, Tyrian, Phoenician. Now, for all normal purposes, all this currency was equally acceptable, but the temple tax had to be paid either in shekels or half shekels. This was because these were the only two coins which did not have a king's head on them. To the Jew, a coin with a king's head on it was a graven image, especially if the king was deified like the Roman emperors were. So the temple authorities had set up stores in the temple where other currencies could be changed into the right currency in which to pay the tax. So it was, on the face of it, a very convenient arrangement. But for every coin changed, the changers made a charge equivalent to about new 1 pence. And if the transaction involved the giving of change, another new penny was charged. So a pilgrim might well be charged an extra 2 pence to enable him to pay his tax in the right currency. And remember that 2 new pence was about half a day's wage for a working man, £75 in other words. It was a blatant exploitation of simple people. Now, as for the sellers of pigeons, they had, if anything, an even better scam. A man might bring his own pigeons to the temple to sacrifice, birds which he had brought outside, but every animal for sacrifice had to be without blemish, and so there were temple inspectors. And if the animal had been brought outside the temple, they would certainly find a flaw in it and direct the worshipper to the temple stalls, where victims which had already been examined were for sale. And now again, it seems a convenient arrangement, but outside the temple, a pair of pigeons would cost as little as 1 new penny, and inside the temple they could cost as much as 75 new pence. Again, it was sheer conscienceless exploitation, and exploitation practiced in the name of religion. The worst kind of exploitation, if you ask me. So Jesus was moved to the use of force. He whipped the sellers, put their animals out of the temple, that is, and overturned the tables of the money changers. And what moved him to this violence was the sight of deliberate and highly profitable exploitation, the making of money by the exploitation of people's credulity or trustfulness, or worse, by the exploitation of their need. And that incurred the wrath of Jesus. And unfortunately, this kind of exploitation still happens today. People are exploited in the name of religion every day, unfortunately. So this is why Jesus was so angry. Let's not be exploiters of people. Let's treat people properly. Let's treat people with dignity and with kindness and with care. Let's not exploit people. Let's not be grabbers of money as some people are. Let's not be greedy for filthy lucre, as the old-fashioned expression put it. Now, there is another parable that I want to look at, and we'll look at that in the next video. So I want to thank you for joining me in this one. See you next time. Bye-bye.